That was awkward. All right, everybody, we are here live with our international Google Plus Hangout. I have a few special guests with me today. I'll just go through and let them introduce themselves. Let's go left to right there and start with Andy.
Hey, hi, I'm Andy Ross. I run a website up here in Canada called 49 North Wrestling. I guess you could say I'm kind of the Richard Immel of Canada. Kind of go around, film all the tournaments, stream them and stuff. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, you're flattering, Andy. Thank you. Daniel, go ahead, my man.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Igali. I'm a 2000 Olympic gold medalist for Canada, a 1999 world champion, and I'm currently the president of the Nigeria Wrestling Federation. And I'm one of those guys going around the world to try to get wrestling back for the 2020 Olympics and beyond.
I love it. I love it. Pedro? Pedro, you're muted. All right, go ahead and start over for us, Pedro. All right. Oh, I think Pedro's muted. We'll get that worked out. Let's just start off. I had a question for actually you, Daniel, and Pedro, if you can hear me, Pedro. I wanted you guys to just first off discuss from your perspective and the perspective of your respective nations how the fight to keep wrestling in the Olympics has progressed for you and your nation since the February decision. So whoever wants to start. Daniel, you want to start? I'll go with you.
Okay. Well, in February, we got this very rude shock about wrestling being eliminated from the Olympics, or at least the suggestion that wrestling should be eliminated, which for us, I think, was a blindsider. And since then, the Nigerian Wrestling Federation, I'm Canadian too, but right now I do a lot of work in Nigeria. And as the president of the at the time I wasn't the president, I was the technical advisor of the national team. And we right away galvanized the wrestling population initially and let everybody understand about the adverse effects of what wrestling not being in the Olympics would do for the movement. I'm also a lawmaker in Nigeria, so I also try to get across most of the lawmaking organs in the country to get their support for wrestling to be reinstated. I went with some of the state governors, especially the governor from my province, Bayelsa State, Chief Henry Seaka Dixon, who was very vocal and even took it to the governors forum and told them about what was happening, and there was outstanding support from virtually everybody. And so far, with bated breath, all the wrestlers are waiting for, I think, September 9th to see the decision of the IOC, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that it will be a positive decision for us.
Yeah, I think we're all there with you on that one. Pedro, can you speak from the Brazilian perspective? That same question. All right, I think we're still having trouble with Pedro. Well, Daniel, let's you mentioned you having that backstory, being from Nigeria, and then you actually won your medal from Canada. Can you talk about that, part of your life and how that sort of transpired for us, and give us a little backstory on that?
Well, I started wrestling as a very young kid back in Nigeria, and where I come from, wrestling is like a culture, not freestyle wrestling, but it's more a traditional style of wrestling. So everybody kind of wrestles, and I was lucky enough to see my granddad, who told me that he didn't even have to pay dowry for my grandmother because he was a wrestler. That's how much the wrestlers are revered in the part of the country I come from. At the age of 16, I actually got discovered by a coach, and that was the first time I was introduced to freestyle wrestling, and I almost made it to the national team almost right away. At the age of 20, I came to Canada for the Commonwealth Games and placed 11th out of, I think, 15 competitors, and I decided to stay back because I wanted to pursue my education, but also at the time we had a military administration in Nigeria, and I wasn't comfortable with how people's human rights were being disrespected, so I opted to stay back here. And in 3 years, I got my landed immigrant status, became a Canadian citizen in about 4 years, and He represented Canada, became the first world champion in 1999, first men's world champion, and their first Olympic champion in 2000. And it's something I won't trade for anything else. Because now that I'm back in Nigeria, a lot of people ask those questions, are you Nigerian or you're Canadian? I'm like, I'm both. If a Nigerian and a Canadian are competing, if both of them are competing, I pray for the person who is better to win. But as far as this goes, it just goes to show that, for me, if we did not have wrestling in the Olympic Games, for me, it would have just been another pastime, favorite pastime. It would have been a recreational project. But because for wrestlers, the Olympics is the height of where we want to get to. Just as for an hockey player, they want to get to the NHL. For a basketball player, they want to get to the NBA. That is how it is for us. So that is what propelled me with reckless abandon to become the best in the world. And my fear is that if wrestling is not retained in the Olympics, for a lot of people, it will just become a mere recreational sport, and it will be good for us. It will be bad for us, and that's why we want it to remain.
Good deal. Appreciate your answer on that. Let's see if we have Pedro. Pedro, can you hear us? You there, Pedro? No, we were having some trouble with him.
Well, initially, I thought his voice was going on. I thought he was back.
I did too. Yeah. Pedro, are you still there? All right. Andy, did you have a question for Daniel?
Yeah, actually, just coming from kind of the media side of things now, because when you won your gold medal in 2000,
yes.
I started wrestling just after that, but I do remember, it was a big deal in the media being the first world champion, Olympic champion, and I'm just kind of wondering maybe how that medal changed your life in terms of just the exposure for wrestling, and maybe even back home in Nigeria, how was it treated? Because obviously, I didn't get a chance to see what it was like over there, because I think wrestling really in the media, before, unfortunately, in February, we kind of got ignored, especially in Canada. U.S. it's a little more coverage because of the NCAA's. So just kind of your thoughts on, maybe how the media has changed over the years, how it impacted your life touring around, both in Canada and in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I definitely, when I won, not even the Worlds, but after the Olympics, I thought even in Canada there was a lot more appreciation for the sport because it was so public. To the point even the Prime Minister told me that he stayed up and watched it. I was able to have dinner with him when I came back. A lot of things happened. I was able to have access to so many schools. At the last count, I think I went to over 500 schools just preaching wrestling, talking about sports. And even in Canada, I felt the Olympic victory made a lot more people understand what wrestling was, what freestyle wrestling was especially. In Nigeria, though, initially, people were not too happy. They were not too happy because they felt it was something that they should have gotten. And being the kind of person I am, I had to make it very clear to people that there's no way I would have been an Olympic champion if I was in Nigeria. Because I do know the kind of effort, both material and physical and personal, that was invested in me to become an Olympic champion right from 2006 when I was identified, and the resources that were placed and the amount of people of goodwill and everything that translated into being an Olympic champion. And I think that's why it's so important. It's so important because wrestling wouldn't have had this same kind of profile if it wasn't the Olympics. If we didn't have that Olympic success in 2000, so many more people in Canada would not have understood what wrestling was. It's the same thing in Nigeria. After that, at the time, in 2000 was the first time Nigeria was also winning an Olympic gold medal in soccer. So to understand what it took to win an Olympic gold medal for the first time in Nigeria's history, and to understand that one of their own, so somebody who was born there, I just won another Olympic gold medal for Canada, I think also made a lot more people appreciate wrestling. And I also understand that in Nigeria, after my Olympic victory, the people that registered to want to wrestle kind of quadrupled. So I think we had that effect not only in Nigeria but in Canada, and I think that's why it's so important that wrestling remains in the Olympics.
Thank you.
Awesome. We have a lot more questions for you, Daniel, but I think we have Pedro back on. Pedro, you with us?
You guys can hear me?
There he is. He's here.
Finally.
All right. Yeah, well, Well, let's kick it back to you and just back to that opening question, of talking about from your Brazilian perspective, what's going on down there with you guys?
First of all, it was a shock for us. We didn't expect that at all. I was in vacation with my family. We were at carnival time here in Brazil. So I was at the beach, and when I opened the internet, 100 questions popped up on my Twitter and everything. Everybody wants to know about wrestling, how come wrestling was taken out of the Olympics. And my first reaction was anger, and then it ranged to deception and frustration. And then I started working, like, what can I do my part. So I tried to contact the Brazilian IOC member, Carlos Nuzman, who is the president of the BOC, the Brazilian Olympic Committee, and head of the Rio 2016 organizing committee. And I started working from there and doing my part in the internet however I can. So pretty much it.
Well, you're a FILA, you're a board member, you're top leader in the Brazil governing body. Can you give us some insights onto the thought processes and strategy that FILA's had, as well as your governing body from that decision moving forward? We've had a few things, changes with the rules, changes with the weight classes, stuff like that. Can you address that for us?
Well, it's really clear for us, not just for me, but for all of us, that since the rise of Nenad Lalovic, changes have come really strong. Like he implemented many changes, and not they're here to stay forever, but we're in a process of changing. So we gotta embrace that and test everything as much as we can and see what works and what doesn't work. But the thing is, if we stayed the same way we were before, we would be at the same position that we found ourselves in February 12th. So I believe changes is very important, and I believe we're changing in the right direction. So I think this is the main strategy in FILA, and also addressing issues like gender equity and the changes in the rules and the constitution. I think we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. I appreciate your answers there. I also wanted to note before we went any further, we were supposed to have Lise Legrand on here with us, and she had to take some time for some personal reasons. And so we wish her the best, and we wish she could be on with us. But having mentioned her, I want to go back to you, Daniel. You were in the presentation in May to the IOC. So can you talk about what went down during that presentation, how everything went, the reaction you got? Can you give us any inside details onto that?
First of all, I was contacted by FILA to be a presenter, and for me it was very heartwarming, considering the enormous responsibility, because I feel like the weight of the world on your shoulders. If you cannot screw up, you could have screwed up the dreams of millions of young kids. So to have been considered to go there for me was very heartwarming. We got there about 6 days before the event. I think about 5 days before the event, we really rehearsed very well. Went into the day of the presentations. Got there, and you could see Lalovic. I remember my friend from Brazil has spoken about him a little bit, but it's like, to put it mildly, like a big teddy bear. It's somebody you see him and you get to like him, Exactly. And there's not so much passion for the sport, and I had not known him before then. So when he came into the room, and you knew that this was your new president, you knew that you were in good hands. We rehearsed very well. We went into the presentation hall about 1 hour before the time, and actually sat in the room we were supposed to present, did the presentation. We were about 3 minutes under where we were supposed to be, so we were very comfortable. The first presentation went very well for us. The rehearsal went very well. So we went out. The other sports, about 6 of them came on before us. We were the 7th sport, and we're 8 in all. And we went in and did our presentation, and we nailed it again. Like we we had rehearsed it. And I knew that we were in. I knew that everything was going well when one of the IOC members actually stood up and clapped. Said he knew he wasn't supposed to do that, and he sat down. So we went out waiting for the result, but we were very happy.
Yeah.
Because we also had some people, about 2 guys who came in and gave us feedback about how we did. And when the results came in, and we went through in the very first round, and the other sport, I think it was baseball, softball, went through in the 7th round, 7th round of voting, and squash went through in the 11th round. So we felt we did a good job.
Yeah.
And, and because of that, and because of how things also transpired, while not taking this for granted, I do feel that wrestling has a good chance. Coming back to Lalovic again, I just spoke to also my IOC member from Nigeria, who is in Russia right now as we speak, because we've really lobbied a lot of people very hard. I've spoken to a lot of IOC members from Africa, and he was telling me that Lalovic was in Russia just 4 days ago, and that he also met him, and that he's been going around doing his job. So I think we're in good hands, and I'm hoping that since we'll be going to Buenos Aires about 11 days ahead of schedule, we will nail it again before the main presentations.
Yeah, well, I wanted to also get your comment on that. How are you using that feedback? Is there going to be anything different in the presentation? You know, what are you adding to it, taking away from it? You know, as you're pitching to a much larger audience, right? So
yeah. The presentations before, you know, was only made to 14 executive committee members of the IOC. Now it's going to be made to the broader IOC General Assembly, which has about 111 people, and maybe many more people who will be there, who are accredited to be there. So our presentations, some of it will remain the same, but we've also added quite a bit to it. I just also got my speech back, and we've been going back and forth to try to see that it works very well. And I can tell you what we have will make our wrestlers very proud.
Awesome. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I have a question for Andy, actually. I want to kick it over to you for a minute. So, you know, you're developing your company. You're trying to get, you know, more coverage for wrestling in Canada, right? You're going around doing all these things on your own dime for the most part. Can you talk about how important it is to you for wrestling to get that bigger coverage, and what motivates you to do that?
Yeah, well, it's like I said, I wrestled from about 2003 to last year. I did some tournaments as well, and I just found in Canada, you know, if you were lucky, you might get a stream of an event, university event. What really motivated me actually in the first place was the last Olympic trials were held in December before London. The web stream, you couldn't really tell who anyone was. You know, you were just kind of watching 2 people wrestle. And I really think, as just a fan of the sport, I just kind of got thinking, you know, like, what could it be to just go film a tournament? And I found out it's not very hard, it's just very time-consuming.
Yeah.
No, like, I think my main motivation is really just getting the wrestlers the respect they deserve, because unfortunately, I wasn't the best wrestler, but, you know, I still enjoyed the sport, and I see a lot of people working really hard every day. Probably, you know, they could be, you know, big names in Canada and worldwide in wrestling. You know, the one example I have today, we just had 2 medalists at the Junior World, Dora Yates and Braxton Papadopoulos. Both medal at senior events. They're still both juniors. You know, it's those kind of wrestlers that I really think deserve the spotlight in the media. You know, up here in Canada, it's all about hockey all the time, all year. You know, even now, if you watch the sports channel, they're talking about who got traded, and, you know, it's the middle of summer, right? So, I think we have the talent in Canada to really, well, especially with the rise of women's wrestling. You know, we're one of the world leaders. And I really think that these people deserve the respect and that exposure. So it's my goal, really, just to get them that exposure. And if I do that, I'm happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your answers, and we obviously thank you for your work. You're doing a great job up there. That's 49northwrestling.com. Is that correct, Andy?
And I have lots of from all over the world too. It's just not Canada. You know, I like to especially get some of the older tapes. I'm seeing all your old coaches and stuff. I think it's great to watch that old stuff, to know where wrestling came from and where it's headed.
Well, thank you, Pedro. I had a little question for you. You know, we've had some creative social media strategies, you know, in this initiative. You've been really active in this. We've seen a lot of pictures from Take a Stance in Brazil. You know, why do you think the wrestling community is embracing these initiatives so strongly? You know,
I believe it's for the same reason. Everyone has the same reasons. It's just a sport that moves you passion-wise. You know, everybody's passionate about wrestling. Everybody involved embraces the causes of the sport in a full manner. You know, I don't know. I believe it's the realest sport. It's a true amateur sport. You don't get rich wrestling unless you are Olympic champ or world champ. Until there, you're struggling. So I guess that doesn't change a lot around the world. You get the same kind of athletes in Iran and the USA and Russia suffering from the same problems and everything. So that's why I guess everybody involved is too passionate about it. So it's easy to move the crowd through social media.
well, speaking of that, Take a Stance, I was wondering if I could get all of you guys to get up in your stance for me. Is that possible here? I can take a little screenshot. All right. I'm gonna get all of you in your stance here. Pedro, let's
Can't
see
beat
the
Igali.
stance. Let's see the stance, Pedro. There's the stance. All right. Nice. Andy, that's a nice stance, man.
Well, I'm used to being on my back, actually being pinned. So
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
You got it?
I'll be sure to tweet you guys these photos here.
Nice.
Yeah. Be famous. All right, so one general question I have for you guys, you can all three speak to this. How have you seen the wrestling world respond to this challenge? You know, how important is it for the wrestling community to be unified across nations like we're seeing in this fight? You know, can you speak to that unity? Any of y'all can answer. If
who wants to go first?
Go ahead, guys. First,
Right,
the Olympic champ.
Let me take it. You know, when you listen to what Alexander Carolan said, when he was asked about why wrestling was removed and how he felt about it, he said it was good. It was good for us because it's almost like we were in a slumber. We had kind of lost track. We had taken it for granted that because wrestling was one of the oldest sports, you know, we're getting a little bit lackadaisical in our approach to things. So I think this exclusion or possible exclusion from the Olympics has galvanized the whole wrestling population around the world. It's made us think smarter. We've now come to appreciate that the Olympics means so much to us, and that if we're not there, so much more will be lost as a result. And that's why when you listen to Pedro talks about the involvement of women and athletes and FILA. You know, FILA was for a long time being run like one man's family. So you sometimes don't even think or understand what is going on in FILA. Only the FILA bureau executives understood what was going on. And with this, now everybody woke up. Everybody woke up to understand that maybe we're a bit dysfunctional. Maybe our rules needed to be changed a little bit. And look at the rules we have. It's made wrestling a little bit more dynamic. Maybe we still need to tweak it a little bit, but I think for the most part, what happened to wrestling, as much as I hate the fact that there are maybe 15 other sports that should go before wrestling, as much as I hate that, I think it's added a spark to wrestling. It's made us become more ingenious, and I think it's made us realize that we need to use our heads a bit more. And for that, I'm grateful for what has happened. The other grateful thing I would be for all of this is if we get wrestling back to the 2020 levels.
Yeah. I think we're all with you on there. Do you guys have anything else to add to that, Andy or Pedro?
Sure. One thing I've noticed, I think the social media has been the biggest part of this too, because I think now, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of people were complaining about the rules and never really had a voice, right? It was just you were sitting around your wrestling room talking with all your teammates about how you like this or that. I think it's brought a healthy level of discussion as well. I think some of the things you see on Twitter and Facebook now, people take as maybe we're working against FILA, or you shouldn't question it, but I think, you know, settling for the status quo, I think, was the problem in the first place. You know, no one really tried to change a whole lot or didn't get their voice heard. So I think now, even though it may not seem it at times, I think we're plenty more unified than we were, simply because we can actually talk to one another. You know, like 5 years ago, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with all of you, you know, about this. So, you know, I still think there's some challenges ahead of us, but I think any discussion is a healthy discussion. I know I'm pretty vocal on all that stuff too, maybe sometimes a little too vocal, but you know, it's good to get your voice heard, and you know, people can complain if they want and tell you you're crazy, and that's good, you know, because maybe I am.
No comment there. No comment.
Yeah.
Pedro, do you have any other thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, I also believe that it was a blessing in disguise. I believe wrestling was in the comfort zone, especially FILA. Like Daniel said, it was pretty much a group of people deciding everything, and now people get their voices heard. So it's good that people can participate in and give their opinion on the future of the sport. So that's pretty much it. I guess the sport has lots to gain, and it's gonna grow better from now on. And when we get back, it's gonna be from here to better. So good. I believe everything's gonna be all right at the end.
That's what I like to hear. I actually have a couple of Twitter questions if you guys are open for them. These are more fun questions, not as serious. Since none of y'all are from America, what's your favorite American food?
Hamburgers.
Hamburgers, yeah.
I like the Tex-Mex. No, it's good.
That's Mexican, man.
Is it?
It's got Tex in the name, so we'll go with that.
Okay, Daniel, who was the toughest wrestler you ever faced?
Lincoln McRae.
Lincoln McRae. Okay, I like it. Let's see, one more. If you were stranded on a desert island, what 3 things would you bring? Anyone? Pedro, go for it.
Lots of water. That's a tough one, man.
Okay, just water. Just water's good,
Water.
right?
Water
Okay.
to begin with.
Okay. Okay. Well, I had one more question, just for me, for you, Daniel.
You didn't
Now
ask me that question, though.
Okay, well, go for it. Hey, it's all you.
Water, obviously, my iPad, and a very nice-looking girl.
Well, there you go. There you go. Oh, man. You guys are jokesters. Okay, well.
And water, right?
So since we got the tough question out of the way, yeah, how has your role in wrestling prepared you to be a leader for your country, not just in the wrestling community, Daniel? Did you hear me?
Yeah, who is that for?
For you.
For you.
Yeah.
Oh.
How has your role in wrestling, your life experiences in wrestling, allowed you to, or helped you in becoming a leader for your country? Since you're in your nation's parliament, you know, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the kind of discipline you get in wrestling is almost unparalleled. Especially if you are in a university system where you have to train morning and evening, and also have to do all your courses and almost compete every weekend. You know, you have to multitask. And all the other things outside of wrestling. When you start getting successful, then you start getting the sponsorships, things that you have to really guard against. The lifestyle you live, you have to live a very healthy lifestyle. And as an athlete, especially when you become an elite athlete, for me, you had to do a lot of video watching. You had to do, so it wasn't just going out and wrestling. There was so much around wrestling that prepared me. But ultimately, I think it was the ability to persevere at everything you did, from weight cutting to those trips, sometimes every weekend for about a month. Those kind of things I think toughened you. And once you added the aspect of school and all that together, that there was nothing else that you couldn't do. in Nigeria, a lot of people ask me how I do it. Like, how are you a politician representing about 100,000 people? How are you also the president of the Nigeria Wrestling Federation? And I was just appointed the chairman of the NOC, the Technical Commission of the Nigerian Olympic Committee. So it's a lot of responsibility because that also includes every other sport. And so people ask those questions, and I tell them it's wrestling. Like Dan Gable says, once you do wrestling, everything else is easy. So I think that's what happens.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to kick it to Andy, see if you had any last questions for our panel here.
Not so much a question, but I'd like to thank both of you, kind of on behalf of the wrestling community internationally, for all the work you did. For Daniel in May and coming up in September, and Pedro, like I said, you're all over the social media, and I love it. You're always there to answer questions and to help us out when we need it. So, thank you for your accomplishments as athletes, and now, as leaders in the sport. And I hope it continues, and I'm confident it will.
Awesome.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys for joining us as well. I think we're about out of time. So I just want to remind everyone to stay active. We've got less than a month until this final vote. There's an online poll on Inside the Games that we've been pushing, so go vote for that. Just stay active. Take your stance photos, send them in. We just want to stay as active and keep a buzz about wrestling as we can. Visit keepolympicwrestling.com. And, thank you for joining us. We'll have one of these next week, and we will announce the panelists for that coming up shortly. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.